Hello, peoples. I'm Ryland, the host, and welcome to the first episode of the Cuban Society program. This podcast is just a place where we can talk about stuff. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Fidel Castro, his history, and just his life in general. I would like to introduce our special guest, Andrew Diaz. He is a devotee, my follower, and dedicated member of the E for Children Society.
Yes, and thank you for having me, Ryland.
Yes, son. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, like you said, I've been part of the Ryland Society, being a member since 2005.
And how's that for you?
It's been going well. We just adopted several gaggle geese for the children, and they seem to love it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, let's move on to the main topic. So tell us, Andrew, about how Fidel Castro interested you.
Él es muy interesante. He is very interesting. And the reason is that there are many assumptions about him. Pero pensamos que hay más a la historia.
Yes, many people have strong opinions about him, and I want to try to dive deeper into the causes and his rise to power. I guess we'll start with a little background. So, Andrew, can you give a bit insight about what Cuba before Fidel's rise to power?
Sounds good. So Cuba, being one of the most advanced countries in Latin America at that time, Cuba ranked 5th in the hemisphere in per capita income. It had better income distribution than other countries in the area and had a middle class that was growing dynamically.
That doesn't sound that bad, but why is it that they were doing so well?
Well, Cuba's economy was largely based on the sugar industry. It created many jobs and had a good market, but there was also a downside to this. There was a multitude of unemployed workers during the off-seasons of harvest, leading to segregation and inequality between the poor and rich. Many of the poor people were illiterate and had little access to healthcare. The political stage during this time was also very chaotic. Since the series of the 3 liberation wars against Spain that ultimately led to independence, the United States had not yet removed their troops.
Yes. This will explain the unease towards the Americas back then.
Yes, exactly. Congress had passed the Platt Amendment that would end military occupation in Cuba, if only they were complied to the 7 terms listed in the amendment, which was intended to defend Cuba's independence. But then during 1933, a revolution broke out, and the current president was overthrown, and power struggles gave way for Fulgencio Batista to bring an age of democracy to Cuba, who was eventually elected president in 1940.
And this didn't turn out so well, though. As I assume, corruption and political violence eventually plagued the government, and this obviously wasn't very good, because many people were angry at the government.
Correct, and this would eventually set the stage for Castro, but that's something I'll get back to later.
Alright, so where was Fidel Castro born?
On August 13, 1926, Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born in his father's farm near Byron, a village in southeastern Cuba. His father, Angel Castro y Arjes, was a sugarcane farmer that was immigrated to Cuba from Spain after being recruited to fight in the Second War of Independence. He married Maria Argata y Reyes and had 5 children, but was having an affair with one of his household servants, Lina Ruz Gonzalez, later having 7 children, Fidel being the third. It wasn't until Fidel was 15 that his father broke up with his marriage of Maria. Shortly thereafter, Fidel's surname was changed to Castro. Young Castro was sent to live with teachers at age 6 and attended various schools during his childhood until he started going to El Colegio de Bellón, a private Jesuit boarding school in Havana. As a student, he was average, but he was known for excelling in athletics and played for his school's baseball team. Then in 1945, he attended law school at the University of Havana, becoming immersed in political climate and passionate for reformation. He joined a revolt in 1947, traveling to the Dominican Republic to overthrow dictator General Rafael Trujillo, but the attempt failed before it started. This is the first in many of his political insurrections, which many more to come. Also during this time, Castro married Murcia Diaz-Balart, who was the daughter of a wealthy politician. They had 1 child, Fidel Angel Fidelito Castro Diaz-Balart, who was born in September 1949. However, their marriage broke apart soon after, in 1955.
Did you know? After returning from the Dominican Republic, Castro joined the Partido Ortodoxo, the Orthodox Party, an anti-communist political party. Its founder, Eduardo Chibas, was running the president in 1948 and advocated nationalism, economic independence, and reformation of the corrupt Cuban government. He He failed to achieve presidency, considering to run again in 1951, but gave up and shot himself because he couldn't achieve his reformation. Castro considered running for a seat in the Cuban parliament, but Batista led a coup that overthrew the government, setting himself up a military dictator and canceling the elections. In an act of rebellion to the new dictator, Castro and about 150 of his fellow Partido Ortodoxo members attempted an overthrow Batista. They attacked the Moncada military barracks on July 26, 1953, but failed, and Castro was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Castro and his brother Raul were both pardoned in 1955 and went to Mexico to try to spark a revolution. It was there he met Ernesto Che Guevara, and together they organized the 26th of July movement, a revolutionary group created to overthrow Batista using guerrilla war tactics. They returned to Cuba with 81 of these activists, eventually succeeding in organizing a parallel government after a long 3-year campaign. Then, on January 1st, 1959, Batista fled the country, leaving Manuel Urrutia president in the control of Cuba. But by July, Castro had effectively taken political power and was sworn in as prime minister after Urrutia suddenly resigned. Once established as leader, he pursued many radical reformations, causing friction between Cuba and the U.S. Castro nationalized private Cuban industry and reformed plantations to ease economic independence from the U.S. by ending Cuban democracy and declaring himself as a Marxist-Leninist. He sought to only deepen American distrust. In 1961 of January, the U.S. equipped Cuban exiles in an attempt to overthrow Castro, but they were later crushed at the Bay of Pigs. Also, during the time, President Dwight Eisenhower broke off diplomatic relations with Cuba, and Russia became the country's main supporter and trading partner. This soon became a problem for the U.S. when the Soviet Union were found building a nuclear missile base in Cuba, 60 miles off the coast of Florida. This Cuban Missile Crisis was only resolved when the Soviet Union agreed to remove its missiles in Cuba, under circumstances that the U.S. would remove their missiles in Turkey and publicly agreed to not invade Cuba. They soon negotiated the terms, but shamed Castro by leaving him out of the negotiations.
Now, after giving some background history, Andrea and I will reenact an interview with Fidel Castro. Andrea will be Fidel, and I will be the interviewer. Yeah! Okay, here we go. By the way, it will be in Spanish. In Spanish, that means Español. That means Spanish. I'm sorry in advance. El 1 de enero del año próximo, ustedes van a cumplir 45 años del triunfo de la revolución.
Sí, todo lo que parecía un triunfo de la revolución, pero había que organizar el credo.
Pero resultó que era un triunfo de la revolución.
El derrocamiento del régimen actual y el inicio del gobierno por parte en gente procedente en experta que estaba en eso.
De toda la explicación que usted dio sobre la nueva perspectiva latinoamericana, ¿cómo se imagina la transición en Cuba?
¿A cuál te refieres? ¿A los hicimos o una nueva?
A la nueva.
¿Y hacia dónde? Dígame hacia dónde. Búsqueme un mejor modelo y yo les juro que haría todo lo posible. Empezará otra vez a luchar otros 20 años por el nuevo modelo. Habla una persona hasta que dice:
Señor, si me permite aclarar, cuando se trata de una figura histórica como usted, los que piensan en una etapa posterior a esa figura histórica son los otros. Nosotros le traemos esto. ¿Cómo imagina el futuro de Cuba cuando Castro no esté en el escenario?
Esa pregunta se la hacen muchos y yo también me la hago.
Por eso,
Sí, pero el error es el creer que Castro es todo porque usted dice: Castro hace esto, Castro ha adiado. Por ejemplo, puedo atribuirme con gente quiero decir porque no quiero estar examinando cosas personales ni muchos menos a la idea de cómo resolver el problema de Batista cuando se le da el golpe de estado el 10 de marzo y no tenemos ni un centavo ni un.
to sum up what was just said in English, was that the interviewer was saying on January 1st next year, he will meet 45 years of triumph of the revolution. And then Castro was agreeing and also saying how the overthrow of the regime was just the beginning of a government that was created by people who were inexperienced. And then also is that the interviewer is saying, asking for an explanation about the new Latin American perspective and how he will envision a transition in Cuba, a new one. Castro then said that he would do anything in his power to find this new model, this better model. He would even fight for another 50 years. Then the interviewer was asking, how do you imagine the future of Cuba when Castro is not in the stage? Castro said many things to that question. If you'd like to find out and learn more, a link to the interview will be in the description.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, and all from only a week of researching. What? Well, thanks for having me. Oh, okay. So where can we find you? Yeah, check out our SoundCloud webpage at Jonaju. You can also check out our Facebook page at The Geese of Germany. That is The Geese of Germany. Links in the description. Oh, thanks for having me. Yep. Okay.
By the way, the company went bankrupt, so it doesn't exist anymore. Bye!